So you're starting a podcast or you've been at it for a little bit, but it's just not growing. Listen, we've all been there at one point in time, or maybe we're just getting started and arriving at that point. Either way, if you're going to have a podcast, you must have effective strategies in place in order to grow your podcast. That's why in this video, I'm going to give you a few tips that are going to help you along your way of growing your podcast. Dive in. It is no mystery that growing your podcast is not the easiest task, but it's not impossible. You just have to stay at it and be consistent with whatever efforts you decide to come up with. Now, I'm going to give you a few strategies today that are going to help get you on your way and hopefully get you out of the I don't know how to grow my podcast mode. You've got to show up in addition to recording podcast episodes and just putting them out. So let's go over a few strategies that I found to be effective with growing your podcast. I've said it before and I'll continue to say it, that your podcast can solve all of your social media content problems if you let it, but that requires effort from you actually doing something on social media. Sebastian, what do you mean by all this? Well, once you record a podcast episode, these days there's a video component and an audio component when recording the podcast episode, and you're able to take that content and repurpose it into micro content, clips for stories and reels and daily Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn posts. Do that consistently every single day, not just right after an episode drops, but from one episode to the next. Episode drops on Tuesday. Drop a piece of content every day in between the next episode coming out. There are several tools, and I've shot a few videos on the channel talking about tools you can utilize to leverage being able to streamline the process of creating micro content. We like to use Headliner.app, great app for audiograms. We use Kapwing, Kapwing, for micro clips and reels and story content. Makes the process just that much easier. Now, if you throw in artificial intelligence and the tools now available, you're making that process even easier. But it's not just creating micro content. In addition to that, it's showing up on social media on a daily basis and sharing your podcast episode and sharing the micro content from each podcast. Maybe hitting up people on Messenger that you know that you can share content with that would find useful. Now, when you're doing this and you're doing outreach to people via DM or commenting or tagging people, make sure that the content that you're tagging them in is relevant to what they're doing. Otherwise, it's a very, very good strategy of being able to upset people, which moves you in the opposite direction of what we're trying to do here with growing your podcast. So first and foremost, at the very top of the list is social media marketing. You should be creating micro content for each episode. You should be sharing multiple pieces of content throughout the week in between episodes, and you should be doing some outreach to people that you know can benefit from the content that you're actually sharing. Next up, email marketing. You should be creating an email list for your podcast. You can sign up for a service like ActiveCampaign or MailChimp. A lot of these services allow you to create an opt-in box that puts people on a specific email list. You can take that opt-in box, have your web designer or whoever handles technical stuff for you, maybe even you know how to do it, and put it on your website or your podcast website. This allows people every time they come to your website to opt in for information on your podcast, your business, your content. When they give you their email address, they're expressing interest in saying, hey, I want to learn more from you. Now, a lot of the times it needs to be a give and take type of scenario, meaning if I'm going to give you my email address, you're going to give me something for free. So download this free PDF on how to create widgets. Just type in your email address here. Next thing you know, you've got someone on your email list that you can in turn start sending emails to and marketing to when a new podcast episode drops. An email list is extremely powerful. It's outside the realm of social media. It's your list. You own it. People have opted in and actually said, I want to hear more from you. So why wouldn't you do that? Now, if you don't know how to figure all of this out, I highly suggest that you hire a freelancer or somebody technical that can help get these lists created for you. Now, it's not a difficult process. I mentioned MailChimp. We use Go High Level over here at the agency. Allows you to go in and create custom forms. You can put name, email, phone number and you copy the little code once they create the box and you put that on your website. Again, if you don't know how to do that, you can easily find somebody on Fiverr or a freelancer to help put that together. But you absolutely must have an email list, because over time, in perpetuity, that list becomes extremely valuable. You can also start doing other fun things with that list, like cross promotions with other brands that you may be working with, other podcasts that you may be going on. But make sure that you actually have an email list in place just for your business in general. Forget about just a podcast, for your business in general. But having an email list allows you to drop an email every single time a new episode is about to drop, did drop. You want to feature something special about your guest. You want to repurpose content and send an email out and share that repurposed content. There are multiple ways to be able to leverage an email list, but you're not going to do any of those things unless you actually have one. Next up, this is a grossly underrated strategy. Collaborate with other podcasters. Do podcast swap. Hey, listen, you can be on my podcast and I'll be on your podcast. I'll promote your show and you can promote my show. Collaboration is extremely powerful in the podcasting space, especially if it's somebody that complements your niche or your brand. Maybe they're in your niche and you guys can collaborate just to create a tremendous amount of value between both brands and both companies with whatever you may be doing. But collaborating with other podcast hosts is extremely powerful with growing your podcast. Because guess what? If I invite you to be on my podcast, you can talk about your podcast. If you invite me to be on your podcast, I can talk about my podcast. When we're sharing the micro content and the episode drops, it's clear there's a relationship there and it helps market both parties. So if you're not collaborating with other podcast hosts and other podcasts out there, you're really being negligent to being able to leverage opportunities to grow your podcast. So reach out to somebody today and say, hey, let's do a podcast swap. It's a great strategy. And last but not least, podcast directories. Now, most people think, well, my podcast is in Apple and Spotify. I'm good to go, right? Well, chances are your podcast hosting account provides a tremendous amount of other directories and listening platforms you can take advantage of. iHeartRadio, Listen Notes, Amazon, which, by the way, allows you to say, hey, Alexa, play the Beyond the Story podcast, and Alexa will then play the podcast. Google Podcast, allowing your podcast to get indexed because, well, it's Google. There's probably 10 to 12, maybe even 15 different listening platforms available in your podcast hosting account. All you'll do is log into your dashboard with whoever you use, go to distribution, and you'll see an opportunity to connect to these other directories and get your podcast into these other directories, because the more, the merrier. All these directories are already indexed on Google. Why in the world would you not want a presence there? So if you're not currently leveraging podcast directories to grow your podcast, you should be, and that's exactly how you can capitalize on making that a reality. Now, if you follow these steps and tips that I've given you, you're going to be one step closer to growing your podcast today. You can begin these tasks today, right now. Hopefully you've been taking some notes. Maybe you'll go back and watch this video again, but please take at least one of the strategies that I've given you and implement it today. Take another one and implement it tomorrow. By the end of the week, you will have a solid strategy on how you consistently grow your podcast and put these strategies into place to make them a reality. Well, I hope you're leaving this video knowing at least one or two things that you did not know about growing your podcast. If you have any questions or comments on this video or any videos on the channel, please leave a comment below. I do respond to each and every one of you lovely people. Until next time.